British Manufacturing Podcast, brought to you by MTD, MFG and Jefferson.
Hello and welcome to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. On this week's podcast, we will discuss the positive British manufacturing news from the past 7 days and introduce a guest, who this week is Edward Pigg, MD of Axil Integrated Services. But before we start the podcast, I'd like to mention Factory Now. The Factory Now initiative has been set up and launched to help the British manufacturing sector boost sales, collaborate and reshore. New members are joining all the time and articles are being updated to the site every day. To view these profiles, please visit mtdmfg.com/Factory Now. Stuart, how are we doing? We've got an action-packed podcast this week.
Certainly have, and looking forward to it. The heat wave seems a long time ago, Joe. I must admit, it's raining where I am this morning.
Yeah, heat wave 2 days ago, and it's chucking down with rain. Absolutely. Speaking of the heat wave, I was actually at the renowned Farnborough Airshow this week, and I know it's been some time since the pandemic and the last Farnborough Airshow, but consequently, there's been a lot of aerospace-related updates this week. So maybe we'll start there.
Absolutely. So Typhoon jets are to be fitted with the world's most advanced radar, and this is part of the £2.35 billion investment programme, which will sustain more than 1,300 UK jobs at BAE, Leonardo and Meggitt. Ultrafan demonstrator, I don't know if you've seen the image of this, the largest jet engine in the world, is nearing completion at Rolls-Royce's Derby site. Once finished, the engine, which is set to run on 100% sustainable aviation fuel, will be tested at the aerospace manufacturer's new £90 million test bed facility later this year. Reaction engines, the RAF, Rolls-Royce again, and other project partners are set to enhance British defence capabilities and establish the UK as a world leader in reusable hypersonic air systems with the launch of a new hypersonic air vehicle experimental programme. And finally, designed and developed in the UK, Team Tempest's new flying combat air demonstrator is set to fly within 5 years. The Team Tempest Future Combat Air System Programme, comprising BAE, Rolls-Royce, MBDA, Leonardo and the MOD, is set to contribute more than £26 billion to the UK's economy and support over 20,000 jobs.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? Yeah, and like I said, a lot of that I saw at the show, including the model of the engine. Actually, I've got a photograph in front of it, and it makes me look particularly small, which is quite rare. But moving on, it's we got an update on the previously announced gigafactory, haven't we? What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, and there's also a new one. So the construction of Envision AESC's new £450 million gigafactory is underway in Sunderland, scheduled to open in 2024. Nissan's Battery Partners' new facility will create and safeguard more than 1,000 jobs. And Johnson Matthey, they've announced plans to build a new £80 million hydrogen fuel cell manufacturing plant in the UK to meet the increasing global demand for hydrogen-powered cars, buses and trucks. This is expected to create hundreds of jobs. And the gigafactory, which is capable of producing 3 gigawatts of fuel cell components annually for hydrogen vehicles, will be built at the British firm site in Royston in Hertfordshire.
Okay, Stuart, let's take a brief pause from this week's positive UK manufacturing news and introduce this week's special guest. It was Edward Pigg, the MD of Axil Integrated Services. Ed, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning.
Right, before we learn about the company, just a little bit about yourself, please, your current role and responsibilities.
Okay, so I'm Managing Director for Axil Integrated Services. We're a total waste management business. We've been established since about 2014, operating across the whole of the UK.
And now a little bit about Axil, the company.
So we are an integrated waste manager. What that means is that we allow our customers, which in the main are manufacturers, we do no high street, leisure, hospitality or retail, it's just manufacturers, to focus on their core activity and we'll take care of the waste. And in essence, we're trying to turn that waste into a resource.
Sure. And what are the advantages of outsourcing your total waste management for manufacturers?
So the advantage for my customers is, again, they can focus on their core activities, manufacturing a finished product. And what we do for them is we take anything that's finished in the economic cycle and has become waste, and we extract value from that, whether it's cardboard or ferrous, non-ferrous metals, and we'll either trade it on the market, but at a minimum, we'll make sure it doesn't end up in landfill. We're looking at the best overall environmental outcome for our customers.
Morning, Ed. Thanks for joining us. It's Stuart. Probably the best way of illustrating what you do to our listeners is to talk about one or two case studies. I know that you work with a number of illustrious manufacturers, including the likes of LEVC at Ansty Park and Whirlpool. So can you please explain the services you provide to them and why they chose Axil?
Yeah. So perhaps before I answer that, I'll talk about why those two in particular are quite good examples. So the big challenge whenever you're trying to identify a waste partner is going through the procurement process. And procurement is quite a dry subject. They're trying to get the maximum amount of service for the minimum cost. But when you're looking at delivering a service like ours, it's very difficult for traditional procurement to work. And both Whirlpool and LEVC were very progressive in the way they work with their on-site operational teams and their procurement teams to look at partners who could really help them with their objectives. And their objectives were improving their environmental performance. But in essence, what we do for these guys is we take over when they have no need for manufacturing materials, effectively waste. But rather it being thrown away or going to the waste industry to sort it out, we do it on their site. So I've got teams of people at Whirlpool and at LEVC. We are segregating, baling and getting materials ready for sale rather than disposal. And what we're trying to do is create income from waste for our customers.
Understood. And I imagine with the procurement team that it's quite price sensitive. But as you say, with LEVC and Whirlpool, the more enlightened manufacturers, they're looking at the whole life cycle, cost and benefit, and looking at things more holistically.
Yeah, you can't criticise procurement teams. They're looking at buying, getting things for the best possible price. Our strategy is more around we're trying to deliver the best possible value, and there's actually a conflict there. So if you're buying, a waste service, the lingua franca in our industry would be a lift rate for a bin. Every bin and container and skip has a separate price. Some have, an added piece on transport. And if your offer is to say, well, you don't really want bins at all, what we're going to do is take the value out of those bins at your site and add value to it. How do you price it in a way that a procurement team can say, do you know what, this is the partner that we need? So, it's very difficult on procurement. So you do need that, operating team, perhaps a CSR team within your customer. Both LEVC and Whirlpool were all over that.
No, good to hear. And so talking about the whole market, I mean, what changes or trends are you experiencing, in the UK at the moment?
So the ESG sustainability agenda is driving, companies, but they know what they want, but they don't really know how to achieve it. So we're really trying to help our customers and the people we're speaking to in terms of the sales process to understand, well, what could you do? What does good look like? And in many cases, it's, well, what's your your sustainability plan? Have you got a policy for procurement to avoid buying materials that have no recycling route, for example? Are you looking at increasing recycling? Have you got a plan to reduce waste in general? And it's that they know what they want, they don't really know how to do it, and I guess that's where we come in.
No, understood. And as you said at the beginning of the interview, you, Axil, specialise in the manufacturing sector. So why did you originally focus on this sector, and what advantages does that offer your customer base?
So we focus on manufacturers because if you're manufacturing the same stuff day in, day out, whether it's cheese or motor cars or engines, the waste becomes very predictable. So if you work line side with the customer, you can segregate waste before it becomes mixed with other waste and becomes a cost. So good segregation is key to extracting value. And ultimately, if you're producing the same stuff, the waste is very predictable as well. That allows me to run my business pretty lean. It allows me to get a following for my waste because ultimately I then put materials into the market. And if my cardboard from LEVC, for example, is clean, it's got low levels of tape and labelling on it, I get a premium on it, which we can share back with the customer.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. It's a really good point. So it's a good for the environment and good for the pocket. So it's a win-win. But if we look at the UK waste management market, what the opportunities and challenges over the next decade or so? Obviously, we're producing more and more waste, aren't we?
The big opportunity is to try and build recyclability into waste, or into products. So, a great example would be you buy a well-known fizzy drink in a PET bottle. That fizzy drink is consumed, and then it's either thrown into a bin or chucked into a hedge because there's no value in the individual, in the PET container. There is if I've got tons of it, but if it's just commingled everywhere else, it's very difficult to manage. So I think there's a responsibility on manufacturers in particular to either look at things like, materials recovery schemes or bottle deposit schemes, which are running in places like Finland and elsewhere in the world, where it goes back probably to the 1960s and 70s, where you buy your bottle of Corona for 40p and it was a 10p deposit on the bottle. The real thing is here, you've got to get value into the waste. Most of this waste is sort of consumer, but from an industrial perspective, it's exactly the same. We want to try and recover cardboard at a customer site that has got low levels of tape and labels on, or we want to recover metals that are either ferrous or non-ferrous, because that's where the premium is. But that's where it takes a little bit of work.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, but hopefully we'll get there. It's about education as well.
Absolutely about education.
Yeah. And if we look at Axil's plans for the next year and beyond, what does it look like?
So it's quite a boring answer, to be honest. It's business as usual. We're really sort of looking back at what happened over the last 2 years with COVID. We took a decision very early on that as an essential service provider, our business would remain unchanged. Yes, we operate in line with government guidelines, but we kept our call centres open, we kept our people on the road, and all of our operating staff operated throughout. And that really gave us the confidence that, our customers wanted to keep manufacturing. That means that they needed someone to deal with the waste, and that's what we were able to do. And LEVC is a great example. We started our partnership with LEVC during the height of the COVID storm. They were looking for a partner, and there was no one else about. It just so happens that we were very active, and we got a great partnership with these guys now. So our future's looking really rosy. We've had a fantastic year of growth, and that's likely to continue.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on the growth. Keep it up, and yeah, thanks for joining us on the podcast, Ed. It's been an education. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What an interesting interview, Stuart. Not something we've covered before.
No, absolutely, and it's not something you actually think about much, is it? But as they've explained, their service at Axil is absolutely vital, and but yeah, good to learn about the sector and the industry and the challenges and opportunities within it.
Sure. And before the interview, we touched on some hydrogen themes, and continuing the hydrogen theme, Riversimple considering a new manufacturing plant in Aberdeen, aren't they?
Yeah, their vehicle, there's the most energy efficient car on the planet, could be built in Aberdeen, creating more than 800 jobs. The designer of the Rasa hydrogen fuel cell power car is running the rule over Aberdeen as a location to produce upwards of 5,000 cars a year, if the right incentives can be provided, including those available to companies, investors via a green free port. So, a couple of caveats there. And Riversimple, they are in active talks about building this plant, expected to be around about 150,000 square foot. And they describe Aberdeen as a leading hydrogen city. So I hope that comes to fruition, because we've not covered too many new manufacturing investment stories in Scotland in recent months. So hopefully one for Scotland.
Yeah, and Raytheon, they're expanding as well here in the UK. Great news.
Certainly is. The American-owned aerospace and defence giant, they've announced plans to open a new advanced laser integration centre next year in Livingston. This is building on multiple contracts and growing demand. The centre will focus on testing, fielding and maintenance of defensive high-energy laser weapons. The Virginia headquarter firm is already one of Britain's major employers, with more than 2,000 people working for the firm across its UK sites.
Brilliant. And to wrap it up, we've got 3 new factories in Hampshire, Durham and Hull, respectively.
Yes, one of the most popular ones, British stairlift and lift manufacturer Stannah. Not sure why it's so popular, but it certainly was. It's set to build a new 90,000 square foot factory in Andover in Hampshire. And this is one of the largest single investments in the family-owned firm's 155-year history. A Tyneside construction firm has been appointed to deliver a groundbreaking factory that will bring hundreds of high-tech jobs to the region. Hepburn Castle Building Services has been chosen by chip manufacturer PragmatIC Semiconductor to build a new £68 million production facility at the former Waving Pipework site in County Durham. And finally, this week, Pensana is set to help break China's near monopoly on global magnet production, which used in electric cars and wind turbines, after breaking ground on a new £150 million rare earth refinery at Saltend Chemicals Park near Hull. And this investment is expected to create more than 125 jobs.
Wow, fantastic, isn't it? Absolutely fantastic. There's lots of news going around at the moment, which is positive. Unfortunately, as always, we don't get time to cover all of the news on this week's podcast. If you want to bring yourself up to speed, do follow us on Twitter or on social media in general. We're not hard to find. Also, go to mtdmfg.com to find the latest news. We've got some breaking news coming up in the next couple of weeks about where you can find this news. But for now, go to mtdmfg.com. But Stuart, wonderful podcast. Thank you to you. Edward Pigg, the MD of Axil Integrated Services. A big thank you to you. But as always, the biggest thank you goes to you guys at home for taking time to listen to the podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can find us on Twitter using @MTDMFG and @Jefferson_MFG.